A very good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me in the room? I am Neha Mishra. I am the track leader of Manufacturing and Supply Chain track, and I'm so glad that you all are here in this room because today, as you all saw, TiEcon 2025 is all about AI-verse. So as Satya said this morning, that what we need to really be looking at is we are all about learning and not all about doing. If you see a big list of things with somebody, you as a technology company should start thinking, how can we help them ease that process out? Now, when we talk about manufacturing and supply chain, I think technological transformation is something everyone has started talking about, but does that relate into AI adoption? Where is each company in that space? So we got this opportunity to have that discussion as part of this track, and I'm so glad the speakers today that we've got, we will be able to cover a lot of things and give you a glimpse of supply chain and manufacturing in different sectors. That was my effort. So again, I am Neha Mishra. I am part of Avathon team. Avathon is an industrial AI company. So I have tried to bring that and previous experience from global supply chain into this track. And let's kickstart with our first track over here, Meet the Synthetic Workforce Reporting for Duty. This is our keynote discussion. And our speakers, Sandeep, Gupta, and Claudia are here. I'll let them kickstart this and give a little bit of overview and kick it off. So over to you, Sandeep and Claudia, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Let's see if this works. Okay, thank you, Neha. Yeah, synthetic workforce. I was just talking to someone. They're like, "What is that?" Right? Just for introduction, Sandeep Gupta. I'm Senior Vice President of Product at Avathon. I've been in industrial space, which is not as well known in the Valley in some ways, but for many, many years. But industrial space is really where a lot of disruption is happening, especially with AI and what has been done. Those industries are traditionally slow in terms of adopting technology. They're more conservative because the impact is a lot more, right? I mean, I get a bad Netflix recommendation, I may be annoyed. I get a oil platform to not operate for a few hours, that's a lot of millions of dollars of losses. So I think that's part of the reason, right? These industries are conservative, but they are changing. They're changing quite a bit. So we're going to talk about synthetic workforce and how that is reshaping the industrial AI platform. And as I said, I'm at Avathon. We are an industrial AI platform company that work in energy, aerospace, manufacturing, and bringing the power of AI into those industries. Maybe hand over to Claudia.
So I'm Claudia Chandra. I am the Chief Product Officer of Honeywell Connected Industrials. My background is over 20 years leading products really in the data management AI application space. I recently went into industrial automation, starting with Rockwell Automation and now Honeywell, really applying the data and AI background to this space. Yeah, like Sandeep mentioned, the industrial space and at Honeywell we address our customers are in the oil and gas, triple M, and chemicals, and really energy in general. And they're quite conservative because of just the reasons that Sandeep mentioned. It does, just a short period of outage will cost millions of dollars for them, right? So there's a lot of conservatism in that space in terms of adopting new things, whether it's cloud, whether it's AI, ML, et cetera.
Okay, so here's a little bit of a kind of what we are trying to talk about here. So synthetic workforce reporting for duty. I was in Middle East. I was last week, and companies that are operating in oil and gas space, the challenges that they face and the conditions. they actually understand the value of what is synthetic workforce in kind of especially blue-collar worker. They're operating in tough conditions, unsafe conditions many times. So robotics, which has been there kind of in some way, shape or form, is taking a completely different role, especially with the advent of AI, large language models, and reasoning models. So we're going to talk a little bit about that here. And one of the key things that you will see, this is a kind of a connected factory, right? It's a lights out factory where you essentially have no humans. And it's actually not that far, right? Not that far. There is obviously factories that are very, very few humans there. Most of it is automated. The thing is, those are fixed, they're doing certain things, and that's kind of where, it's been very successful. What happens when you're not, in that way where robots have to make decisions, these, again, synthetic workers have to make decisions. This is a stat which was actually incredible when I saw that 40% of operational work in industrial enterprises will be done by synthetic workforce or agents. And that's by 2027, right? So that's 2 years out. And that's from a Gartner study. And the reason, again, why, because, there's huge demand for the tradespeople, and it's very hard to find those people, especially post-COVID. There's been a huge challenge in the industry getting those people. So how can, again, these industries operate at the highest efficiency possible, and they are looking for alternates, even though they are conservative. I think one of the things is demand of the people that they need, and lack of supply is kind of also driving these industries towards that. So we talked about oil and gas. One of the other area that we see is manufacturing. And manufacturing is very big in automation already. But there are still essentially folks that are kind of making decisions along the way. And with the AI and reasoning models, agentic models, you can see a future where essentially all of it will be autonomous. I think if you were in Satya's talk, you heard him talk about there still will be people involved where some kind of final click is done by a human to a future where essentially it will be fully autonomous. So Claudia, obviously Honeywell works with industrials. You have your own hardware as a company, and then but you work obviously on the software side. What are some of the advances you are seeing in the automation that you have seen?
Some of the key applications of AI ML in the industrial space are, for example, applying predictive maintenance so that you can predict ahead of time potential based on anomalous behaviors of an asset, potential failures of that asset, right? To reduce the downtime, reduce the costs associated with even planned downtimes, and really at the same time optimizing across processes, production, and energy utilization. So it's not just about asset, right? So that's one key area. There is also using AI ML in combination with first principles and heuristics in order to more flexibly and adapt to changing conditions so that you can more optimally optimize processes. And then using Gen AI to automate the process design, and also potentially based on these process models, also automatically design the simulations in order to train the process engineers based on those process models, and evaluate on a continuous basis how effective are those training to these operators, and based on those evaluations, then automatically also adjust the content of the training, right? So those are some of the things And also in conjunction with AR, VR, as well as natural language to simulate some of these things in order to train these engineers. There's also optimizing the energy utilization, so reducing emissions of methanes and carbon emissions, right? Along with what I mentioned, asset and process optimizations. And then the key area is really going towards autonomous operations in plants, because a lot of these plants are in remote locations that are difficult to get to, and also areas where there's a lot of safety issues, right, for humans to actually go there, so such as mining areas and remote oil rigs. So really the intent is to reduce having to operate and send people there, and remotely monitor and remotely operate as much as possible using AI agents.
Very, very cool. And so what are some of the key challenges in this journey that these industries are facing that you have seen?
Yeah, some of the key challenges are firstly, depending on the verticals, such as mining, for example, digitization and sensorization may not be as mature. So, getting data may not be as easy. In those cases, you need to first sensorize, right? So that's one thing. The other, the next is the quality of data, and there's also a missing data, and whether a specific training data is available to actually get to that level of accuracy. And contextualization is a key one as well in that area. The other, like I mentioned, is AI ML data-driven learning. It may not be enough to get that level of accuracy. You need to complement it with deep domain knowledge, first principles, etc., in order to get to that level of accuracy and specificity of recommendations. And then there is also, because things like closed loop controls require low latency, so you need to deploy some of these controls and AI ML on the edge, right, as close as possible to where the actions is required. So you may not be able to leverage cloud as much in the execution. And also security air gap requirements, for example, will need you to think about more of a balanced architecture of edge and cloud, so that you potentially perhaps train in the cloud and execute on-prem or on the edge, depending on the security and latency requirements. So those are some of the things. Those are things that needs to be considered. But perhaps you can talk about the workforce, synthetic workforces. Which sectors do you think would adopt those as more quickly than others, and what are the first steps that businesses can take in order to
I think kind of
leverage
very well with what you just said, the challenges kind of in these sectors, right? The data, the security at the edge, air gap solutions. So, I'll give some examples of sectors that today are doing that, right? And again, it's only going to grow. In oil and gas, we talked about that. That sector is really ripe with innovation from, I would say, white collar to blue collar, complete, right? An example, when you do offshore exploration of oil, collect a bunch of data, that takes almost a year to process with a lot of kind of manual steps along the way. To where now these things are going to be done in a fully autonomous way with reasoning models, bringing in the domain expertise that the model, a small language model, has learned, and is going to fully do this seismic imaging, if you will, and the interpretation of this. So from about 12 months, could you actually bring it down to 12 days? And that's done with high-performance computing, with the autonomous system that can actually potentially accomplish that. The other area where intersects is supply chain, actually very, very in big way, right? One of the things that we are seeing supply chain is really looking at autonomous systems. If you ever worked in kind of CPG or any of these manufacturing sectors, there are hundreds of planners that are actually planning the products based on the demand and the plan of the company and so on. It's a very, very manual, iterative process, and that's another area that is actually, again, ripe for a kind of a full autonomous synthetic planner, if you think about it, that would essentially do that work in a very fast and real time, right? So you're adjusting your demand in real time also. So not only obviously in the operation of the assets that are there, but in the manufacturing sector, that's another area we are seeing. And the companies are, what they are doing already, I think, is really, you kind of touched upon the data part of it. However, I contend that it is not as important now to have as clean a data with kind of the new technologies as it used to be, especially the unstructured data. To be able to explore that unstructured data with large language or small language models has just become a lot more easier than it used to be, of course, just a few years back. So now bringing that data, your enterprise data, your sensor data, all into kind of a multimodal way, we actually combine visual data along with that too. So it is possible to automate a lot of those processes that require that human intervention at many steps along the way.
Yep. And what do you see in terms of this leveraging of synthetic workforce? Which jobs will stay and which jobs will go?
Yeah. I think that's a question always, right? Hey, the AI is going to take our jobs. I think it's not, and a very smart person who's going to be talking soon after this said, it's job description will change, right? Jobs will not go away. Job description, that what you're going to be doing will change. I think most people, will all agree, nobody wants to do repetitive, mundane stuff, right? And we all do that. I think 20 to 25% of our time is probably spent in finding information within the enterprise, as you know. If you can actually imagine, remove all of that, and now you get 20% more to do value-added work.
Yeah.
The blue-collar, work especially is not going to go away right away, right? Robotics and large language models, they're coming together to, I think, really automate this. But I think it's just the jobs will become easier. Some of the harder, unsafe jobs that are done in oil rigs or mining operations, I think they are the ones that will get automated first because the cost to human life, that's safety is such a big concern. So I really think believe in this, that it's not jobs will go away, they will just change in the way they are being done.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So in Honeywell, right? So when you are kind of doing this, so what trends do you see will accelerate this journey? Like what are things that you think are accelerators for this journey?
There are a bunch of, it's economic, geopolitical, technological factors all combined to drive some of these advancements in utilizing AI, ML in this space, right? So there's also a high pressure to increase profitability, production, while reducing costs and energy utilization. There's a lot of competitive pressure as well, and you touch upon supply chain, the value chain, all of that global complexity and geopolitical uncertainty also demands a much more agile set of systems that are able to adapt more flexibly to changing plant operational conditions. And the workforce, there's aging workforce nowadays, that it makes it, there's much more pressure to more quickly upskill the newer workforce who are not as experienced. And with advances of technologies, then it also becomes more critical to utilize these technologies to more quickly upskill as well as become more efficient within the plant, right? So using AI, ML for analytics, for decision making, for automating a lot of the work, and to codify a lot of that domain knowledge and tribal knowledge that is slowly being lost, right? So those are the complexities that will drive a lot of the leveraging of these new technologies.
And actually, I was chuckling there a little bit because that's actually a big factor. I mean, I visit a lot of sites, and this big issue with our customers not having enough workforce and retiring workforce. We're working with a large company that is actually taken 20 years of their data, and we've essentially built model for them that allows their newly trained or new technicians, right? People were coming when they have to do repair. They just did not know the systems, right? The workforce that retired had been working there for 20, 30 years. Aviation, energy sector, people actually stay for a very long time. And when they leave, that tribal knowledge is getting lost. So I think the accelerator to, again, the unstructured data, to be able to take all of that, to be able to codify, take that domain knowledge, the manuals, and there are like these huge books they have of information, but again, people who are coming in, they don't know all of that. So again, can a model actually, today it's assistive. I think really where we are in an assistive phase. We are assisting people, co-pilots, right? To where at some point you really don't need people to kind of, click a button, you could actually do that.
Yeah. And what do you think can today's workforce do in order to make themselves, prepare themselves to be more ready to work alongside these synthetic workforces?
Yeah, I think upskilling is kind of really the right word. It's changing, right? You cannot stay in the same static space as the world is changing.
But is it upskilling in a different way?
Upskilling in a different way, right? So it's, I think, again, borrowing Satya's, he said, knowledge workers, we shouldn't confuse that with the knowledge today. That there'll be different kind of knowledge that these people need. As humans, we can adapt, we can just learn. So this will be slightly different things that they will be learning. I think a couple of years ago, prompt engineer became right a job description that wasn't there. And similarly, you're going to have inference engineer. There's going to be more and more things that you need to do to make sure that these models stay in line, if you will, right? And to be able to help with that. Now, a lot of stuff that is going to get automated is really, again, the mundane work. If you are kind of just doing repetitive tasks, those are going to get potentially automated and done by robots or synthetic agents. So you want to be able to upskill in other areas on how to manage these agents, and coding is going to become easier for everyone to do. So could you actually upskill in that way too?
Yeah, sure.
I know we have a few minutes for questions.
Hello, I'm Dr. Rahul Walawalkar. I'm president of Net Zero Energy Transition Association. So one of the area I'm curious where I'm talking to many of our member companies is looking at, can AI play a role in sort of decarbonizing the manufacturing supply chain as well as shorten the timeline for commercialization and scale up of new technologies? Because traditionally it has taken almost 30 to 50 years for many of the technologies we take for granted right now for scaling up the manufacturing ladder. But we need to maybe in next 10, 15 years bring some of the other technologies which are right now at the lab scale to help scale the manufacturing. So do you see how AI can play a role in that?
So I think there are a few ways in which that is maybe happening to some extent. It's actually a balancing act, right? AI has also increased the demand for energy, and so that was plateauing, for example, here, and now it's starting to rise again, the energy demand, and that's typically coming from conventional fuels as renewables are catching up. But I think material research and how, so that's one area where it will enable, battery technologies and, green hydrogen and a few other things. Within the manufacturing sector, we have seen new materials, again, that can be used, new processes that will be way more efficient using AI. I think that's the path that companies are taking. That how can we leverage that for energy efficiency within, again, they're all add up to when you kind of are looking at net zero goal that a lot of companies or countries have.
Yeah, I think the other side of it is I mentioned about optimizing assets, and that part of it is actually reducing the energy utilization emissions, carbon emissions, et cetera, right? As part of servicing the assets and optimizing the assets. Also, how do you optimize the processes, production processes, in order to reduce that energy utilization and emissions? I think that's part of the more holistic optimization.
Hi. My name is Suri Chabla, founder CEO of Level Plane. Claudia, the question is for you. With AI coming in, one of the, you've seen tariffs coming in, there's a lot of disruptions going on. People are looking for alternate supply chain closer to where you manufacture. So I think there are two questions. One, of course, is that something which is you see impacting Honeywell? Second, I think the use case that we're trying to solve is more on the sourcing side. A lot of the sourcing, like you said, is very tribal, right? A lot of people kind of have knowledge. The senior sourcing people, and what you're trying to do using leveraging AI to kind of make some of the junior sourcing people more empowered, right? So they can negotiate. I know we're talking to Lockheed Martin on one hand, with the auto companies on the other side. Do you see that as a good use case for AI to solve?
So I think your question, if I understand you, is Honeywell looking to be closer to the sources of materials for manufacturing? I think we're looking more at how to optimize how we source, where we source from, versus changing, the locations as much of different hubs of manufacturing, et cetera. That's as far as I know. I'm of course more on the software side, like I mentioned, but I think your second question is sourcing an area where AI ML can potentially be leveraged? I think yes, from the perspective of, again, it depends on what kinds of things you're trying to source, right? For example, if we're looking at inventories of parts, et cetera, materials, definitely, you can do demand analysis, demand forecasting, and optimizing the inventories and how you would schedule those inventories to be replenished. The other side of it, of course, is figuring out optimizing where the sources come from, what the prices are of those materials that you are sourcing should be, right? Optimizing the suppliers, as well as optimizing the pricing across suppliers are some examples. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Deepak Ahuja with a family office. I was wondering if you could provide some more, or you talked about how in metals and mining and oil and gas, there were mundane tasks that are going to get automated. Can you provide some examples of what are those, like where do you see those tasks starting and where do you see it kind of moving up the value chain in terms of like some specifics around that? Thank you.
Yeah, I can maybe take that. So I think there are, specific examples that I think I gave one on, it's not mundane, not everything is, right? Like where it takes a lot of time and there's a lot of kind of like manual processes where human is evaluating something. I talked about the example of a seismic image for oil and gas. There's an interpretation step that requires, PhD level scientists to be able to do that. I think you can train a model, and it's actually being done, where you can actually do that and automate the whole process to where you can essentially give guidance to where to drill. Other area is where I think predictive maintenance, we talked about that. Today what happens, right, the models actually predict something, human actually reviews it and says, hey, look, what action needs to be taken, this is the maintenance activity I need to do. Then they put a ticket and somebody actually then kind of gets scheduled to do something else, and then a part is needed, then they go there and say, oh, this part is needed. So if you think about that, the time it takes from, you can do a lot of good work in the prediction and the models, but there's a lot of other stuff that actually reduces the efficacy of kind of even getting that prediction to improve, let's say, uptime. This can actually be automated, and people are already doing that, where you can actually prescribing exactly the solution because you have the work order data for last, 50 years, and there you have the manuals. You can actually now know which exact part from the bill of materials that can be ordered, and the suppliers, right? If basically you have this network, then it can all be done, right? And somebody asked a question of procurement, which is the best supplier, which is the best location to order this part in order to reduce that time to, let's say, getting back that asset online. So I think those are some of the examples that, that's actually being done to some extent today, and it's just getting more and more.
Potentially the tasks in order to perform the fixes.
That's right, and 3D printing, we talked about it, right? So another thing is, right, hey, look, you just basically now, you're gonna have in remote locations, where trying to get a part to Alaska, for example, is really, it's just gonna take a long time. You're gonna have 3D printing machines that can actually print the part, and it is available, and potentially a robot in the future that actually will replace it. Now, of course, not today, but that's, So I don't know if it addresses that question.
We do have 3 questions, but we are running out of time. So our speakers will be available here to answer them. So feel free to come and have the conversation. We will move on to the next session now. So thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.